real artists. They were very much aware that they should produce a specific style, that without style it's nothing serious. So they were very aware of this and very conscious of what elements they should put together.
Today's guest is doing such interesting things in the bass world. It's my pleasure to bring you this conversation about vibrato, and we could have so many other conversations on similar topics, and hopefully we will in the future. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Greek bassist and pedagogue Vassilis Papavassiliou. And I have been meaning to have him on the podcast for quite some time. He's really doing interesting work on the topic of vibrato. And so when I saw Vassiliou in Lucca doing presentation on that topic, we found time to sit down at a cafe in the streets of Lucca and chat about this topic and the work he's doing and the discoveries he's made and just how vibrato works. I found this to be such a fascinating conversation, and we could dig into so many other topics and will, I'm sure, in the future, but I really hope you enjoy this deep dive on vibrato. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, A440, Upton Bass, D'Addario Strings, and Robertson & Sons. You'll be hearing more from them later, but let's dig into this conversation with Vassilis Papavassiliou. So we're sitting here on the square in Lucca, Italy, here in the summer, and Vassilis has been doing a vibrato presentation for several conventions. So why did you get interested in vibrato? What made you inspired to dig into this topic?
Well, in the past, I have also approached different aspects of bass playing. For example, thumb position. In a very similar methodological way. Okay. And what is this? It's my approach is to break down a musical problem, a complicated problem, into smaller problems that are so simple that it's a question of physical or technical or anatomical. Not musical anymore. This, in turn, gives opportunity to the student or whoever is involved in that to not be stressed about it. When I'm exercising something, for example, in my vibrato, for example, it's not musical exercise. It's a technical or anatomical exercise. So you just do it without the extra stress or agony that now I have to do something and have some kind of good performance. It's not about performing at all. It's about knowing your body, knowing your anatomy. And I would dare to say that this is the Aristotelian concept, breaking a complex problem down in so many pieces that each piece is not of the same nature of the original problem. It's of very simplified nature.
So something that a lot of people wonder about, and I know you've researched this, but when we're doing vibrato, where is the center of the pitch? I put my finger down. Am I vibrating above and below the pitch? Am I vibrating to the pitch? How does that work?
Well, first of all, there are no rules.
Right.
First of all,
that's true.
I would never start. And what we're doing. Playing below the pitch or around the pitch or above the pitch, yes, one can do that if he knows what he's doing and he wants to produce a specific style or a specific character. So it's not about rules, it's about studying, well, what I did, okay? I took the great recordings of the great teachers of violin, like Heifetz and all the great school of the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They were coming from Russia, this great violin string school. And I took all their, not all, but most of their recordings, sonatas, Beethoven sonatas, etc., and slowed down. There is a program in computer. It's called Slow Downer.
Yeah.
It's actually for transcribing.
Right.
But you can also use it for recognizing ways of playing and everything. And you know, you go down 25% of the speed, or 50% of the speed, or 30% of the speed, and then the vibrato sounds like ow, 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 ow.
Right.
And then what I found out was that most of the times their movement was very precise, very even, and most of the times it was below the pitch, below the original pitch, and on the beat. Well, when the beat was happening, it's not a correct way to put it, but
Right.
yeah, the finger was on the original pitch.
Oh, interesting. So, like,
Yes.
if we were, if you had a metronome on, the original pitch would be on the click of the metronome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Although metronomical approach is not my approach.
Right.
I use a metronome, but rather like a pulse. They are on the beat, but it's their pulse, their inner pulse that produces that. Probably sometimes it coincides. This was my perception. Then, of course, when they want to produce effects like extra sentimental movement or some kind of crying effect or whatever, they, of course, do what they like. They can go above the pitch. That's when sometimes we listen to their notes and they sound quite high-pitched.
Yep.
But it's so evident that they wanted them to sound
Right.
like this. And that means that they have total control. They know where the original pitch is, and they know what to do above or before or whatever. Now, I know very well that all the good violin schools talk about this.
Yep.
I've not been present in many, but I've been present in teachings by great teachers. Ruggero Ricci, this is one I can remember right now. And I remember he was mentioning that. We don't do it so much on double bass. Probably nobody arrives at that level of precision
Right.
to really get involved with that. But if you ask me, is there any reason, is there any physical or musical reason, letting style or character aside? And yes, there is. It's about the vibrato enforces the oscillation. If the finger goes above the original pitch, actually it intervenes on the frequency or on the way that the string vibrates. That's why that's probably most of the Roten vibrato we are listening to has to do with that, with the finger intervening or corrupting the purity of the oscillation,
Okay.
of the movement, how we call it.
Yeah.
The
Interesting.
frequency.
Interesting.
So, yes, we use actually, the finger moves backwards, but our mind is towards the note. Mm-hmm. And that's why the old teachers had the violin always. This very special exercise, I have it in my method too, that the finger goes slowly back away from the original pitch, waits there, and goes back immediately.
Interesting.
It's slow back,
Yeah.
wait, fast forward. And this is quite useful if you can master this to create a very precise vibrato and small vibrato that is very useful when you play classical style, like main practice period.
So if we were going to graph the vibrato oscillation, it wouldn't be like a sine wave. It wouldn't be up and down. It would be slow going back, and then it would.
This is an exercise.
Yeah.
But and always exercises have a psychological aspect.
Sure.
You do this not so much as to do it in reality like that, but in order to prepare your body for that. The immediate movement towards the original pitch just makes you remember that you should push towards the vibrating string. It's like adding energy.
Yeah.
It's like tickling the string to vibrate in a richer way. And this is what makes a big sound, a beautiful sound, one of them.
This episode is brought to you by the A440 Violin Shop. It's located just down the street from Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago on the north side, just off the Brown line. I have been going there my entire adult life, and they have been fantastic, both for repairs. I've had cracks repaired. I've had seams glued. I've had all sorts of students go to A440 to get instruments, to get bows. They're available with a smile, do wonderful work, and definitely check them out if you are in the Midwest. A440violinshop.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Robertson & Sons Violin Shop, and they have been serving the string community and the bass community for decades. Here's Don Robertson about the genesis of the Chromatic C extension. Were you the first to do that?
As far as I know, I did the first chromatic extension on Paul Ellison's bass.
Yeah.
We were up here several days, day and night, in a row to figure this thing out, and we came up with this swivel capo style, and I think Paul's was first, and Edgar Meyer was second when we did.
Learn more about their chromatic extensions, basses they've got in stock, and everything else that they do at robertsonviolins.com. Now, how about in terms of register, high pitches and vibrato and low pitches of vibrato? How does the speed? Have you determined? Is there a correlation? Like if we're up on the upper G string on the bass and we're going a certain speed, is that going to typically be a different speed than way down on the E string? What are your?
We can choose to do that.
Yeah.
But here it's about two things at the same time. Probably you mean that the thicker the string or the lower the position, the bigger the movement has to be.
Yeah. Is there a relation?
I can. Amplitude of vibrato is one quality.
Yeah.
And frequency of vibrato is another quality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can actually, in my second part, this is what I'm going to work on. I mean, just doing vibrato by augmenting is
yeah.
good word.
Yeah.
Augmenting the frequency of vibrato, going from slower to faster, but with the same amplitude and same dynamics. And this gives a form of crescendo. Or augmenting the speed. No, the speed is augmenting the amplitude.
Yeah.
Going from a thin vibrato to a very thick vibrato. Now, your question, of course, was different. That if we want to, and I'm coming to that, if we want to have the same amplitude from lower position up to higher position, the amplitude is different. Mm-hmm. It has to be much broader in the lower position.
Right.
It follows the rule of the intervals.
Right.
It's absolutely analogous to that. If I want to keep the same effect, if on the other side I want to make an crescendo of amplitude, then this is a trick I do. I keep the same amplitude, and the higher I go, the wider the vibrato feels.
Okay, interesting.
And so the auditor gets a feeling that I'm making the vibrato bigger. And also from the thicker the string gets, the more the amplitude has to be broader too.
Yeah.
Wider.
Wider.
Yeah. And this is always small calculations we're doing in our minds. sooner or later it becomes natural, and it becomes part of our aesthetics. I mean, my whole concept is always to be out of the comfort zone. This is one of the traps for many bass players, that they find a comfort zone and then everything is absorbed into that. No, it's like a car that has 16 speeds, not automatic gearbox. I always want to use, to be very specific, what part of the string I'm playing, on what part the bow is, and what kind of vibrato, if any vibrato, and why, and what is the character I want to reproduce.
Yeah, bass players a lot of the time I think don't have a wide enough palette, or maybe they don't realize that there's more they could do in terms of vibrato speeds and colors and qualities. How do you? Or what are some exercises that you have found, or things that you do personally, or that you recommend to students for developing different styles of vibrato?
Yes, different qualities of vibrato. Because we use the vibrato to create a style.
Sure. Exactly.
But when I put the first part of the method, actually what I did was to take all the teachings, as far as this is possible, of course. Who says what? Michael Wolff says that. Another guy says another thing. Klaus told this, and every concept is integrated in that. For example, if one teacher says that the fingers should be vertical and only vertical, another teacher says the fingers should move sideways and only sideways. What I did, I gave a name to the vertical vibrato, I gave a name to the sideways vibrato, and I gave a name to the thumb position vibrato. So I think what I did is that all principles of vibrating theories are integrated in my three main categories, which is normal neck position vibrato, intermediate position vibrato, and thumb position vibrato. But it's not geographical. I can use intermediate position vibrato in neck, or neck position vibrato in intermediate position, and so on. Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear. It's clear. Yeah.
So I tried not to leave anything outside. I don't think anybody could come to me and say, you don't. My style is not like you say there, because in one way or another it will be there.
Yeah.
Even with thumb position, I have both thumb on the string and thumb off the string.
That's great. I was wondering what you found in terms of that, because there's so many different recommendations. Everybody's got a different. Some people say keep all four fingers down when you're playing fourth finger. Some people say it's okay to let some things release, but you found that all sorts of different things are being used in the neck and the intermediate and the thumb position vibrato.
When I come to the part talking about thumb position, I also make a mention to my older method which is called Rule of Thumb. It's a book about really putting down our hand very precisely for playing thumb position, with all the subdivisions, the relative positions, the relative distances, and everything. And I take this and adopt it in vibrato method. For example, I will give you an example. Today I spoke about this, that if we play with first finger in thumb position vibrato, we have at least three choices if the thumb is going to be in a semitone distance, or in a tone distance, or in a three semitone distance. And those three cases produce a totally different result. For example, if you are in a three semitone, you have a broader, you have a bigger, expand of string to move your hand and make a more wider or more expressive vibrato, for example. But you should be always conscious. So I don't say it's this or that. I say, do this, do A, do B, do C, do D. Be aware of all possibilities.
Interesting.
This is my approach. And I hope that nothing is left outside this.
If you're... This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. Apply graphite, like pencil lead, to the bridge and nut, the contact points of the string, to ensure the strings slide smoothly on their way up to tension. This prevents them from getting stuck and unwinding or pulling the bridge so that it leans. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Upton Bass String Instrument Company, a company that I have been such a fan of over the years. Gary and Eric and all the good folks at Upton, they do extraordinary work. They've been at it for a long time, and it has been so much fun to watch them evolve over the years. And a question they get asked a lot is, what's the difference between their Bohemian model bass and their standard model basses? And basically what it boils down to is they come from the same basic outline, but there's much more customization available in a Bohemian bass. So Upton standard basses basically look like each other. They're either laminate, hybrid, or carved, but they're similar in their form, while you can get your Bohemian bass customized if you want hat peg tuners, if you want all sorts of other details. That's the bass you can customize. And if you haven't been to the Upton website recently, they're constantly adding new videos, new photos, new descriptions, and every bass has a story. And I love following along with these stories. Visit them at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. We could be talking about bass players, or we could be talking about violinists or cellists or anybody, but if you were recommending that a student listen to some of the great players as just examples of different just to open their minds in terms of vibrato, are there any bass players or non-bass players that you typically recommend?
Yes. Of course, I cannot be encyclopedic.
Right, of course.
But I would... go another way, I would just remind some people, and two French people come in my mind now. I don't know if you know Jean-Marc Rolles.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yes, this guy is now 85. I don't know if he plays anymore, but if you listen to his recordings of Bottesini, for example, it's amazing. I had lessons with him for a long time. I've had lessons with most prominent.
Yeah, either one. Yeah.
Bass players when I was a student, and they were famous at that time. So I have multiple experience of the big players. Mm-hmm. He has an excellent taste. You can say yes that he has a deep romantic sound. But this deep romantic sound is not heavy. Yeah. It's light at the same time. And I still believe that if we come to Bottesini, it's the French school that really comes closer to the original. Because let's not forget it, Bottesini died as a director in the Paris Opera. So
yeah, it's true.
Yes, so I think they have the right to be quite specific about it. Yeah. Bottesini is not heavy music, it's light music. It's closer to operetta than the opera. Yeah. And I think that this playing deep, sentimental, romantic sound, really, he plays romantically because he was a romantic person. Genuine romantic player. Mm-hmm. So I suggest to come back a little to this guy, and another player who left me speechless was Adrien Navarra.
Okay.
The cello player.
Yeah.
This musician, I think, has a lot to give. I think the new generation is not very familiar with this play. Perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
Perhaps they should go back, and there is real wisdom in how he uses the various elements. And those artists were real artists. They were very much aware that they should produce a specific style, and that without style, it's nothing serious. So they were very aware of this and very conscious of what elements they should put together. Those two poetical figures, we need more poetry in bass. We don't have enough, I think.
That's a great sentiment. That's for sure. And it's so great to take. We spend so much time thinking about left-hand fingering systems and bow strokes and that sort of thing. But vibrato is such a key component of the expression of a musician, and so just digging deep and analyzing all these different elements. I think it's a really valuable exercise.
It's like specifying your toolbox.
Yes.
And yes, something I forgot to say, perhaps that if I want to have a nice vibrato or something that sounds good, it first definitely has to sound good without vibrato.
Yeah.
And when a phrase, even a romantic phrase, sounds good even without vibrato, when I have placed my fingers really strategically on the notes, very consciously what part of my finger, the bone, the flesh, how it goes to the string, this is the purity of tone. The purity of tone comes first from anatomical perfection, precision, and then vibrato comes as a complement to that. Actually, the best vibrato is not non-audible.
Yeah.
It's just perceived like purity of tone, and this is my direction.
That's great. And I think that's something that people lose sight of. And that's something that singers speak of too. When you're talking with people that are well-trained vocalists, that the vibrato, they don't really think of it as something they're adding on. It's just it's a component.
It's part of our body, and then if you want to become a sociologist or anthropologist, sociologist, then you have to go back to see what is vibrato as a bodily function in terms of addressing other people. And then you go back to, for example, that the Roman orators were quite scientific. The Greek orators were also scientific, but the Romans really overdid it, and they became theorists of that. And you know that if you go to ancient Rome, an orator had no microphone, and probably they could have large audiences. How were they audible in the back of... how were they audible?
I've thought about that myself. How? Yeah.
By gestures. Whatever they were doing, they were having symbolic gestures.
No.
So if you were far away, even without listening precisely what they were talking, what they were saying, you were sure what they were talking about and about the sentimental content of their speech. One of those elements was probably vibrato. I mean, vibrato in speech gives extra carrying power to the voice, but also it expresses all the inner sentimental movement, or makes people become sentimental. Let's think about our dead.
That's true.
Yes, if you go to America to 19th century, I'm sure they had lots of it.
Yep.
Go to the... how is this guy? I mean, this guy who was philosopher, sorry about... well, the name does not come, but he's like a father of nation and one of the fathers.
Right.
He's a wise person, and he was an orator also. Sorry about not... it's not very scientific.
No. That's
I recall the name. He has written books also, and I'm sure they were addressing people with this type. And this, as far as music is definitely language, it has syntax.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm talking, I'm playing a musical phrase. Yes, it has subject, it has verb, It has, I don't know the name, but categorium.
Yeah, like subject, predicate. Yeah.
I'm D and I'm becoming F, for example.
Yeah.
This is inside, is written on the classical it's there, it's built in. So I'm talking a language very consciously. And yes, I can use my sentiment in order to enforce this. For example, this is one way to put it. But yes, anthropologically, there is a lot of basis why we need vibrato and why we use it.
Well, it's a great exploration. I think it's just becoming conscious of this and analyzing. It just gives us more in our toolbox, like you said.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And now I see it's an enormous. I'm going to keep myself constricted to the technical,
yes.
Purely technical. The second part is about using varied quantities and qualities of vibrato in order to produce different effects. This will be the second part. And the third part, when the time comes, will be the historical vibrato. I will give examples of historical uses of vibrato, which of course requires some academic research in order to arrive there. But I promise by next season I will have ready my second part. Okay. If you think it's
Well, I'll look forward to it. Yeah, so it's great. Thanks for the work you're doing, and it's been a long time coming, this conversation. So it's great to meet in person and chat about this, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you for being here and listening to me.
Vassilis, thank you so much for chatting, and I really hope that folks enjoyed this conversation about vibrato. Super interesting, made me rethink several things in my own playing and how I'm practicing and how I'm teaching vibrato. So I really enjoyed that, and boy, is it fun to go to events like Bass 2018 in Lucca. If you were there, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're thinking about going to one of those events, if you can make it work financially and time-wise, I know that's a real challenge, but if you can make it work, you will be so glad you went. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Steve Hinchy, Mike Cooper, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. Mitch is making basses in the Dallas area, doing all sorts of great work down there. Look him up online at mitchmooring.com. And thank you to Krista Copper for cataloging and archiving all of these episodes, the topics that we cover. It's so helpful moving forward with the podcast. I'm your host, Jason Heath, coming to you each and every week from San Francisco, California, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.